My hand trembled, and for a full second I thought the lie would die right there on my tongue. The crystal pitcher of water felt heavy, a prop in the most important performance of my life, a performance that had been running for 5 straight years. I steadied my grip with my other hand and forced the smile that had sold 1,000 bottles of useless herbs and now kept 200 people from tearing each other apart for a can of beans. The memory of the last day in the old world came back sometimes, usually at moments like this when the lie felt thin. I was in a stuffy midtown office, pitching BioQuell to a room of new recruits, telling them how turmeric wasn't just a spice, but a golden key to cellular rebirth. The sirens started around noon. They weren't the usual city sounds of complaint and urgency, but a single, unending scream from every direction at once. The smell of burning rubber and something sweet like roasting meat drifted through the vents. Outside, the sky had turned a strange yellow, a color I'd never seen over Manhattan. That was the first spore cloud, though we didn't know it then. We just thought it was a fire, a big one. People went to the windows, their phones pressed to their ears, getting nothing. Then the screaming in the street began to change, becoming less human, more animal. That was the day the world frayed, the day my greatest con became a prophecy. I raised the pitcher high, the water catching the clean mountain light. Below me in the plaza, the people of prosperity looked up, their faces a mix of desperation and reverence. They were so hungry for a beautiful lie. I knew that hunger because I had lived it my whole life. 5 years ago, my voice boomed, bouncing off the sleek, useless glass of the old corporate retreat buildings. The world was given a test. A plague of rot and ruin came upon us, and the great cities fell, the governments fell, the science fell. I paused, letting the weight of it settle on them. I swept my gaze across the crowd, my flock. I saw farmers with calloused hands, former accountants with hollow eyes, children who knew nothing but these walls and my story. But we did not fall, we endured. A murmur of agreement went through them. Amen, prophet. We endured because we have a shield. We have a grace that the fungus cannot touch, that the thralls cannot break. I lowered the pitcher and poured a stream of water into the stone basin at the front of the stage. I bless this water. The same immunity that shelters me, I share with you. It will flow through our pipes. It will nourish our crops. It will keep us clean. It will keep us safe. My eyes found Kadira standing to the left of the stage. She was a statue in scavenged tactical gear, her hand resting on the pistol at her hip. Her face was a mask of stoic belief, but I could see the fire in her eyes. She wasn't just a believer, she was the furnace that kept the community's faith burning hot. She saw me look and gave a short, sharp nod. She was the first person I saved, or rather, the first person whom my lie gave a reason to live, and she had never let me forget it. Then I saw a small movement in the front row. A girl named Alara, all of 8 years old, with big eyes and a thin frame, reached a tentative hand toward the stage. She was the perfect mark. I smiled my warmest, most disarming smile, and stepped down from the stage, moving toward her. The crowd parted from me with hushed awe. I knelt in front of her, the worn leather of my jacket creaking. "What is it, child?" She didn't speak, just pointed a small finger at my chest. "You want a blessing?" She nodded, her eyes wide. I placed my hand on her head, my fingers sinking into her fine hair. I felt the collective inhale of the crowd. This was the real magic, the personal touch. "Be strong," I said, my voice dropping to an intimate whisper that was still loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Be fearless. You are a child of prosperity, and you are protected." She looked at me as if I had just handed her the sun. I gave her a final pat and stood, turning back to the stage. As I did, my gaze drifted to the edge of the plaza, to the medical tent. Cori stood there in her sterile scrubs, arms crossed, watching me. Her expression was not one of reverence. It was one of critical assessment, like a scientist studying a peculiar specimen. Her dark eyes were fixed on my hand, the one that had trembled just minutes before. She saw it. I knew she did. She probably dismissed it as fatigue or the emotion of the day, but the observation had been made. A data point had been collected. For a moment, our eyes met across the plaza, a silent exchange between faith and fact. I turned away from her and returned to the stage to finish the ceremony. The people's cheers washed over me, a warm bath of adoration and security. It was what I craved. It was the only thing that mattered. Later, in the quiet of my private building, the prophet's mask came off. The space was the former retreat CEO's suite, comfortable and isolated. I poured myself a glass of water, the same water I had just blessed, and drank it down. It tasted like plain water. My hand was steady now. The tremor was gone, a brief mutiny of the nerves brought on by the stress of the performance. I ran the tap and splashed cold water on my face, looking at the tired, 42-year-old actor in the mirror. My eyes went to the heavy oak bookshelf against the far wall. I walked over and pulled a row of pristine, pre-fall hardcovers forward. They swung out silently on a hidden hinge, revealing the thing that proved my entire life here was a fraud. A Collins KWM-2A long-range radio sat in the hollowed-out space, its dials and gauges gleaming faintly. It was a relic of my father's, a man who believed in being prepared for the end of the world. I hadn't used it in months, not since the last garbled transmission from a faction calling itself the Directorate promised a cure in exchange for uninfected specimens. Still, it was my secret tether to the world outside, my desperate hidden search for a real answer. I reached in and gently touched the cool metal casing. A beautiful lie was more useful than a harsh truth, but even I knew it couldn't last forever. Corey's analytical stare was proof of that. A tiny crack in the shield. The tremor started in my left hand while I was trying to bless the morning's bread. I held my palm out over the loaves, a gesture I had perfected over 5 years, but the fingers began to flutter like a trapped bird. I clenched them into a fist and hid the motion by turning it into a grand, sweeping sign of grace over the whole kitchen, a bit of off-Broadway flourish that earned me a few reverent nods from the bakers. They saw a prophet filled with divine fervor, but I felt the cold sweat of a liar about to be caught. My body was becoming a traitor, and every day was a new performance to hide its rebellion. The light in my quarters felt like a physical assault, so I started wearing a pair of old sunglasses indoors, telling everyone it helped me see the auras of the faithful more clearly. They ate it up. People will believe anything if it makes them feel special. At night, the act stopped. I would lock my door and peel the bandage from my calf. The twin punctures were now surrounded by a web of thin black lines spreading under my skin like ink in water. I had to use a sterilized knife to carve away the tiny gray polyps that budded at the wound's edge, biting down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. The pain was a sharp reminder of the clock ticking inside me. I spent my nights poring over medical texts Corey kept in the infirmary library, smuggling them out one at a time. My fingers, slick with sweat, traced diagrams of fungal anatomy and cellular invasion. I found what I was looking for in a pre-fall mycology textbook. It was a clinical drawing of a late-stage infection, showing a human figure covered in gray lesions, its lungs choked with fungal growth. I read the final sentence under the illustration, and the words burned themselves into my memory. Mortality rate, upon presentation of neurological symptoms, is 100%. My hand started to shake again. Corey's questions were getting sharper too. She would find me in the plaza and ask about my diet, my sleep, my energy levels, her dark eyes looking for a crack in my story. I would just smile my disarming smile, place a hand on her shoulder, and tell her the spirit was a demanding thing. Her expression never changed, but I knew she wasn't buying it. She was a scientist, and I was an anomaly that needed to be solved. A week later, the sky turned a sickly yellow, and the wind brought the smell of rot. A spore cloud, a big one, was rolling down from the gray zones in the north. The sirens blared across Prosperity, and the lockdown protocols began. The panic was immediate, a low current of fear that I was expected to soothe. I gathered everyone in the main hall of the old retreat, the geothermal lamps casting long shadows on their upturned faces. I started my sermon, my voice echoing with practiced confidence, speaking of faith as a shield and my grace as their shelter. Then the coughing started. It was a dry, racking spasm that bent me in half at the pulpit. I tried to cover it, tried to turn it into a holy exclamation, but it seized my lungs and wouldn't let go. Kadira was at my side in a second, her hand on my back, her face a mask of concern. I saw Corey across the room, watching me with an unnerving stillness. She wasn't looking at a prophet. She was looking at a symptom. That night, trapped by the lockdown and my own failing body, I did the one thing I had sworn I never would. In the back of my closet, under a pile of old blankets, was a shortwave radio. I powered it up. The static, a roar in the silent room. I spun the dial for hours, listening to nothing but the sound of a dead world. My research was useless. My body was a time bomb, and the walls of my comfortable kingdom were a prison. Then, through the noise, a voice, broken and faint. It repeated a sequence of words, but I could only make out two of them clearly. Cheyenne, mountain, trials. Hope, cold and sharp, pierced through my despair. It was a direction, a chance. I focused on the signal, trying to get more, when the broadcast abruptly cut out. The static returned, but then a new sound emerged. It was a clean, automated voice speaking with perfect clarity. Signal source pinpointed. Subroutine Judas Goat initiated. Dispatching collection team. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the fever. I had been looking for them, and now they were looking for me. The spore cloud passed, but the lockdown had made us look vulnerable. The Rust Dogs, a scavenger pack that roamed the I-25 corridor, began testing our perimeter with coordinated raids. They were a nuisance we could handle, but their attacks gave me the excuse I needed. I called a meeting with Kadira and Corey in my chambers. I told them I had received a vision during the storm, a vision of a weapon, a pre-fall relic that would secure our borders for good. I told them I had to go on a pilgrimage to find it, alone. Kadira looked at me, her brow furrowed. Prophet, my protectors can retrieve it. Your place is here, safeguarding prosperity. It's too dangerous. It was the first time she had ever questioned me. The first crack in the shield of her faith. My faith is my shield, Kadira, I said, my voice harder than I intended. The vision was clear. I must go. She looked away, a conflict raging in her eyes between her duty to protect me and her duty to obey me. I had just broken something between us, and I knew it. Corey said nothing, she just watched, her face giving away no thoughts. After they left, I packed a small bag. As I was checking my supplies, I saw a flicker of movement outside my window. It was Corey, walking purposefully from Kadira's barracks toward her lab, and she was carrying the torn, blood-stained trousers I had worn the day I was bitten. The truth was no longer a secret. It was just evidence waiting to be presented. That night, a quiet knock came at Corey's lab door. It was Kadira. Her face was pale. "The prophet is leaving," she said, her voice low. "We have to stop him." I slipped out before dawn, my body aching with fever. The journey through the foothills was a nightmare of dodging Thrall patrols and hiding from Rust Dog scouts. I was weak, and every step was an effort. I wasn't heading for some mythical weapon. I was heading east, toward the plains, toward the last known location of a Directorate patrol route I'd heard about from a captured scavenger years ago. I walked for 2 days until I found what I was looking for, a barely visible track in the dirt. I followed it and waited. Eventually, a small, silent drone appeared over the ridge. I didn't run. I dropped my pack, fell to my knees, and raised my hands in surrender. Hours later, I was sitting in a sterile white room inside a massive mobile command center. A man in a simple gray uniform sat across from me. He had no nameplate, no rank, just calm, empty eyes. This was the administrator. He didn't ask questions. He told me facts. They knew about prosperity. They knew about me. "Humanity is the patient, Mr. Sorbo," he said, his voice even and detached. "Some limbs must be amputated to save the body. Your community, isolated and pure, is a perfect petri dish for our cure's final trials." The old salesman in me took over. It was my only card left to play. I leaned forward, crafting the greatest lie of my life. I told him my people were a flock of sheep, genetically pure, a perfect control group. I told him I would deliver them to him. all of them, in exchange for a cure. He considered my offer for a moment. A pragmatic solution. We have a deal. He motioned to a medic, who came forward with a syringe filled with a clear liquid. The administrator explained it was a prototype suppressant, not a cure. It would halt the fungal replication. The medic injected it into my arm, and I felt a cool rush spread through my veins. As he stepped back, another medic approached with a second, smaller syringe. "What's that?" I asked. The first medic smiled, a cold, empty expression. "Insurance. A microscopic tracker. Welcome to the program, Judas." The journey back was different. The suppressant worked fast, chasing the fever from my mind. The administrator's words echoed in the newfound clarity. "This won't cure you. It contains a synthetic marker protein that halts fungal replication. For a scientist, it's a roadmap to the infection's core mechanism." He hadn't given me a cure. He had given Corey a key, at the cost of everyone I knew. The mental quiet was excruciating. I saw the faces of my followers. I saw the children who sang psalms about my immunity. I saw Alara, a little girl who had given me a woven bracelet, her face filled with absolute trust. I had just sold them all to men in sterile rooms who saw them as lab rats. I chose to become a monster to save my own skin, and now, with a clear head, I found the cost was too high. My survival was no longer worth it. I stood on a ridge overlooking the valley where prosperity sat nestled in the foothills, a single light against the darkness. My arc was complete. I wouldn't be their savior. I would be their sacrifice. I would use my death, my infected body, to give them a chance. I would make the lie true in the only way I had left. As I stared down at my home, a glint of metal caught my eye on the main road below. It was a convoy of Directorate vehicles, moving silently, efficiently up the canyon. They weren't waiting for my signal. They were already coming. The main gate was a jagged wall of rust and ruin, and Kadira stood before it like a statue carved from judgment. She did not raise her pistol. She just held up a small, folded piece of my own trousers, the cloth stiff with dried blood. The tiny dark shapes of Directorate drones moved in the clear sky above her head. "Corey found saliva," she said, her voice flat. All the fire burned out of it. "Thrall saliva? In the fibers." I looked past her to Corey, who stood a few feet away, her arms crossed. Her face was a mask of cold fury, the look of a scientist whose worst hypothesis had just been proven correct. The clear air from the suppressant made my mind sharp, but it could not hide the truth crawling up my neck. I pulled down the collar of my jacket, showing them the thin black veins that had reappeared, a spiderweb of my own damnation. "It got me," I said. "The day at the clinic." It was a bite. Kadira's face crumpled. It was a small, almost imperceptible shift, but on her stoic features it was like watching a mountain crack. The pain in her eyes was a physical thing, and it hit me harder than any fist. I had not just lied to her, I had broken the world she had built around me. "The Directorate," I continued, my voice gaining the old practiced cadence of the pulpit. "They are not a myth. They are real, and they are ruthless. I went looking for a cure, and I found them instead. They want prosperity. They see us as specimens for their labs." I left out the part about the deal, about the Judas goat and the tracker in my blood. A beautiful lie is more useful than a harsh truth. My own motto tasted like ash in my mouth. Before either of them could respond, a new sound filled the air. It was not a noise so much as a pressure, a deep, painful vibration that seemed to bypass my ears and drill directly into my skull. People cried out and clutched their heads. The drones overhead descended, emitting piercing flashes of white light that turned the world into a stuttering nightmare of black and white. The Directorate was not here to talk. They were here to herd cattle. The immediate, overwhelming threat slammed the door on my betrayal. Kadira's pain hardened back into the stoic mask of the enforcer. She raised her pistol, not at me, but towards the gate. "Everyone to the plaza," Corey shouted over the sonic assault. Now. The central plaza was a scene of chaos. people were on the ground, retching from the sonic pulse, their faces bleached by the strobing lights of the drones. I climbed onto the low stone wall of the central fountain, my body screaming with a new kind of fever as the suppressant's effect wore off. My voice was my last weapon, and I used it. I did not shout, I preached. Prosperity, I began, my voice rolling over them, a familiar comfort in the disorienting attack. Listen to me. Slowly, heads turned. They saw their prophet standing tall against the chaos, and the panic began to subside. I have not been honest with you, I said, letting the admission land with its full weight. 5 weeks ago, I was bitten by a thrall. A gasp went through the crowd, a collective intake of breath that was louder than the noise from the sky. I did not tell you because faith without a trial is just an opinion. I was given a test, a holy quest. I was sent into the wilderness to find salvation, not just for myself, but for all of us. I pulled the syringe from my jacket pocket, the clear liquid catching the flashes from the drones. The world believed the only cure was a miracle. But I saw in my vision that faith could only find the door. I saw that our own Corey was already building the key. I turned to Corey, who was staring at me, her scientific mind struggling to process the scene. I walked to her, my legs shaking, and held the syringe up for all to see. Faith found the path, I boomed, my voice filled with every ounce of theatrical power I had left. But science will light the way. I plunged the needle into her arm and pushed the plunger. She stumbled back, looking from the empty syringe to my face in disbelief. The moment the last drop of suppressant left the vial, I felt a violent surge inside me. The black veins on my neck pulsed, darkening, and a fresh wave of heat washed through my body. The fungus knew its enemy was gone, and it was reclaiming its territory with a vengeance. Corey saw it. She saw the sickness bloom across my skin, and in her eyes, I saw the dawning, terrible understanding of my final con. I had not given her a cure. I had given her a roadmap, and I had just set my own clock to 0. The main gate exploded inwards in a shower of twisted metal. The first wave of Directorate soldiers came through, clad in white biosuits, their rifles raised. The mesmerized crowd was a perfect target, a flock of sheep waiting for the slaughter. "Follow Corey," I screamed, my voice raw. "Follow Kadira, to the geothermal plant. Go." The people hesitated, their eyes wide with fear. Kadira grabbed the nearest person and shoved them toward the main retreat building, her voice a hard bark of command that finally broke the spell. As the crowd began to move, I saw a single red flare lying in an emergency kit near the fountain. I grabbed it and ran, not with the others, but toward the edge of the property, toward the large, squat diesel tanks of our fuel depot. My lungs burned, and black spots danced in my vision, but I forced my legs to move. I needed their attention. I needed to be a bigger threat than 200 unarmed civilians. I twisted the cap on the flare, and it ignited with a fierce hiss of red fire. "Over here," I roared, waving the burning light over my head. "You want your sample? Come and get the source." A half-dozen of the white-suited soldiers turned, their rifles swinging towards me. They started to advance, methodical and disciplined. I ran the last few yards to the largest diesel tank, my hand on the cold, rusted metal. I could hear their boots on the gravel behind me. I turned, looked at the faceless helmets, and gave them my warmest, most disarming smile. Then I threw the flare high into the air, an offering to the leaking fuel valve just above my head. There was a deafening roar, a wave of impossible heat, and a flash of brilliant, world-ending light.